Something different has begun to be noticed at St. James Park in recent days, a kind of silence that often says more than any press conference. There has been no official announcement, no bold quotes in the headlines, but internally the feeling is that important decisions are being carefully shaped. For the more attentive Newcastle United supporter, this kind of atmosphere never appears by chance. It usually comes before moves that directly affect the club's present and, above all, what is being built for the near future. While the spotlight remains firmly on results on the pitch, behind the scenes the coaching staff are observing an increasingly delicate scenario. The season is entering a decisive phase, with fixtures piling up and very little room for error. It is precisely during these periods that planning is put to the test, demanding quick, cold and strategic choices. And if you enjoy following this less visible side of Newcastle, understanding these internal dynamics helps you see far beyond the final scoreline. The feeling inside the club is one of controlled alert. It is not panic, but heightened attention to details that could make all the difference in the coming months. The squad remains competitive, but physical fatigue is starting to show more clearly. At times like these, every decision taken off the pitch can be just as decisive as a stoppage time goal. If you enjoy this kind of deeper analysis, it is worth subscribing to the channel now so you do not miss any detail. Eddie Howe, known for his calm and analytical profile, now finds himself facing choices that were not fully part of the original plans for the start of 2026. The manager was hoping for a more stable period, without major setbacks, but football rarely follows a script. The congested calendar and physical demands are beginning to take their toll, creating a scenario that requires swift responses from both the board and the coaching staff. It is at this point that the central theme of this story begins to take shape. Injuries, which once seemed like isolated incidents, have started to pile up in a worrying way. Newcastle United's medical department has become increasingly busy, and 2 new absences have raised an even stronger warning sign. Fabian Schär and Tino Livramento have become the latest names to join that list, completely changing the club's internal picture at this stage of the season. Fabian Schär's situation is particularly delicate. The Swiss defender, a key figure in the defensive organization, is expected to be sidelined for around 3 months. Tino Livramento, who had been used regularly, faces an estimated recovery period of roughly 8 weeks. Together, these absences drastically reduce Eddie Howe's defensive options, forcing the manager to work at the very limits of the available squad. With these setbacks, Newcastle are now living a routine of almost surgical player management. In virtually every match, Howe has been forced to use almost all available players, with very limited room for rotation. This increases the risk of further injuries and could compromise the team's physical performance in decisive fixtures. For those who follow the club closely, this is one of those moments that can define an entire season. It is worth remembering that Newcastle United remain alive in 4 different competitions. This competitive overload demands not only talent, but real squad depth. Without reinforcements, the risk of a drop in performance becomes very real. And that is exactly why, behind the scenes, the debate over potential market moves has returned with full force, even if the public message remains one of caution. Faced with this scenario, Eddie Howe is assessing whether or not to enter the market before the transfer window closes. The initial idea was to keep the squad as it is, but circumstances have changed. The manager knows that pushing on without adjustments could put the team's recent good form at risk. And when decisions like this start to be discussed, specific names inevitably come into focus, reigniting old rumors. One of those names has been gaining strength again behind the scenes. It is a young, highly rated defender who was closely monitored by the club in the recent past. The idea of strengthening the defense with a player of this profile appeals to the coaching staff, especially given the current situation. It is the type of signing that not only solves an immediate problem, but also fits into a long-term project. Newcastle United continued to be linked with Atalanta centre-back Giorgio Scalvini at 22 years old. The Italian is seen as one of the most promising defenders in European football. Last summer, his valuation stood at an impressive £52 million, a figure considered beyond the club's financial reality at that specific moment. However, the situation has changed. According to information from the Chronicle, Scalvini's asking price has reportedly been adjusted to around £35 million, making the deal far more realistic. Although Newcastle have monitored the player, no formal move has yet been made. Even so, the possibility that this interest could be reignited remains very much alive in the corridors of St. James Park. This kind of opportunity tends to arise precisely in moments of need. A reduced price, combined with the urgent requirement for defensive reinforcements, creates a favorable context for negotiations. For Eddie Howe, the arrival of a player like Scalvini would represent not just an emergency solution, but a strategic investment for the years ahead, strengthening the spine of the team. Meanwhile, another important move is beginning to gain prominence, this time away from the external market. Internally, the club is working to ensure stability and continuity in key positions within the squad. In competitive seasons, keeping fundamental players can be just as important as signing new ones. And it is exactly this balance that the board are seeking right now. Newcastle, United have made progress in negotiations to secure a contract extension for a player considered essential to the sporting project, while the details are still being handled discreetly. The agreement represents a clear sign of mutual trust between club and player. Decisions like this send a strong message both to the squad and to the supporters about the direction the club intends to follow. For supporters, these movements show a club that is attentive, one that does not simply react to problems but tries to anticipate scenarios. If you enjoy following this kind of quiet construction, which does not always make immediate headlines, subscribing to the channel is the best way to receive complete and up-to-date analysis of every step Newcastle United take. The combination of a potential strategic signing and the renewal of a key player says a lot about the current management. It is not just about putting out fires, but about thinking short and long-term at the same time. In an increasingly competitive football landscape, this ability to plan could be the difference between an ordinary season and a memorable campaign. Eddie Howe knows that the coming weeks will be decisive. Every choice, every negotiation, and every medical decision will have a direct impact on results. The challenge is significant, but it is also in moments like these that major projects are truly forged. For Newcastle United, this could be a silent turning point, one that is only fully understood when looking back. With the transfer window progressing and the calendar tightening, time becomes a crucial factor. The board need to act with precision, avoiding impulsive moves while not missing valuable opportunities. The name Scalvini, for example, may represent exactly the kind of rare chance that appears when market conditions and necessity align. At the same time, internal contract renewals reinforce the idea of continuity. Maintaining a solid core allows new signings to integrate more easily, preserving the team's identity. It is this balance that sustains consistent campaigns and builds trust within the dressing room.